we should be done talking about the 2020 election cycle and we should move forward. I think politically that makes the most sense, that builds the most consensus. That election has been litigated, relitigated, and I think it's time to move on.
I've been talking a lot now for months about that it's time we start looking through the windshield rather than the rearview mirror.
Thoughts from the leaders of both chambers of the General Assembly on putting the past behind and looking forward on this day one of the 2022 legislative session. Good evening, I'm Donna Lowry. Welcome to Lawmakers on GPB on this, the first day of the 40-day session when 236 elected officials from all over the state will help determine the future of Georgia through the laws they enact under the Gold Dome. We expect a lively session in a year when state offices are up for grabs. On the agenda, everything from crime and Buckhead cityhood to elections and pandemic-related issues. And of course, the mandated reason for the session, the budget. We'll talk about what to expect this session with journalists who cover the legislature. Another big issue expected to dominate the session, legalizing gambling. Two lawmakers, including the chairman of the House Regulated Industries Committee, joined the show. But first, I'm happy to welcome back our Capitol correspondent, Brenda Waters. Hi, Brenda. There's a lot to preview for this session, but let's start with what really had everyone excited under the dome today.
Hey, Donna, glad to be back. There was a lot of excitement, but first let me tell you about the Kickoff. As always, the annual Wild Hog Supper kicked off the political season Sunday night. Now, the supper also served as a fundraiser that helps the Georgia Food Bank access fresh fruits and vegetables grown right here in Georgia. This year, House Speaker David Ralston and Agriculture Commissioner and U.S. Senate hopeful Gary Black headlined the event.
This past year, 16 million pounds of Georgia-grown produce left the farms of Georgia that ordinarily would not have been used, but they went to feed hungry families in Georgia through this wonderful food bank.
This indeed is day one of the 2022 legislative session. But Speaker of the House, David Ralston, says it is also National Championship Day. Go Dogs. They were pumped up in the House opening the session with the UGA fight song. Both sessions were pretty short today. The House adopted 3 resolutions, as did the Senate, which also assigned legislators to escort Governor Brian Kemp to the House chambers Wednesday when he makes his State of the State address. The House and the Senate also set up their calendars for the next few weeks. Both chambers are not in session tomorrow, but we'll be back right here on Wednesday. Now, there are many burning issues this year. At the top of that list, constitutional carry, book banning, depoliticizing school board members, and what will legislators do with $3.6 billion in surplus money? Will the money be used to give teachers a raise? We'll find out. A look at all of that and more coming up. But first, let's look at some of the stories that went viral last session. SB 202 changed the way Georgians vote, made national news, and prompted protests across the country. Governor Brian Kemp signed the bill, which made changes to absentee voting, early voting, and vote counting. Representative Park Cannon was arrested as the governor signed SB 202. She knocked on his door, demanding she be allowed inside. She was handcuffed and removed from the state capitol. And remember last year we told you about that 8-foot-tall security fence and gates going up around the state capitol? Well, they're both up, erected in response to protests in Atlanta last year. It also cut down on the night security and prevented having to deploy National Guard troops to protect the grounds. The Speaker of the House and the Lieutenant Governor met with reporters before the legislative session began to lay out their priorities and what they hope to accomplish. Speaker Ralston addressed crime in the city of Atlanta and suicide among young people.
6 months ago, I announced a $50 million budget proposal on 2 critical public policy issues, public safety and mental health.
Lieutenant Governor Jeff Duncan plans to tackle crime as well with the Less Crime Act, which will generate support for local law enforcement agencies using a dollar-for-dollar state tax credit and allows funds to go directly back into communities across Georgia.
These dollars are going to arrive at their local law enforcement agencies through various mechanisms, whether it be the foundation or other means, that are going to allow these law enforcement agencies to be able to laser focus those dollars to either hire more officers, pay them more, train them better, or buy better equipment for their officers.
It's an election year, and Governor Brian Kemp and gubernatorial candidate David Perdue want to pass a constitutional carry law that would eliminate permit requirements. In the past, the bill never advanced.
You'd be hard-pressed to find anybody that's probably supported the Second Amendment more than I have. I know that the constitutional carry narrative has been played out over the last 10 years in different forms and fashions with legislation. And so I think it's a worthy conversation to have, but it's all about the details and it's about how we deliver it.
Well, we all support constitutional carry. It's in the Constitution. Depends on what version you're talking about. As long as we have a process by which we can know whether an individual has the restricted background things, the permit's not really what is a big deal to me.
Whether Buckhead should become its own city has also created a lot of conversation. Speaker Ralston says he has not come to a conclusion, but the lieutenant governor says,
I have yet to see somebody deliver any sort of tangible information to me that says create the city of Buckhead and crime goes away overnight. I feel like it's an issue that they've attached themselves to, the folks that want to move the cityhood effort. And at this point in time, it's not like a few city signs that say, welcome to the city of Buckhead is going to stop the criminals.
That's my Capitol report, but one more thing before I go. Go Dogs. Donna, back to you.
Well, of course. Thank you so much, Brenda. We're expecting a robust legislative session, and here to talk about some of what we might expect are two GPB journalists, political and elections reporter Stephen Fowler and public policy reporter Riley Bunch. Thanks for coming on, Lawmakers, both of you. Let's dig right into some of the major issues, and for that, we have to start with the effort to carve Buckhead out of the city of Atlanta. Lieutenant Governor Jeff Duncan talked about it recently, saying he felt the need for more tangible information before considering a bill.
The weight of this really rests in the details. How are you going to educate kids in the city of Atlanta? Is that agreement already made? The answer is no. How are you going to handle the fiscal fallout from creating a city of Buckhead with bond packages and sewer packages and water treatment facilities?
So, Riley, I want your thoughts on this and what he had to say. And it also sounds like neither he nor the speaker are really very interested in going anywhere with this.
So there are a lot of logistical questions when this issue comes up that proponents aren't always talking about or leading with, right? So there's a question about how will they handle schools if Buckhead secedes from the city? How will they handle city services, right? And this is the point that Lieutenant Governor Jeff Duncan is bringing up. And he has been adamant that he is not in favor of this. Ralston has been a little bit quieter, but hasn't shown a lot of interest. So there's things you need to think about, like the fiscal impact as well. And it's definitely, these are going to come up during committee meetings on bills about this.
Yeah, so it's going to be big, but there's still a lot of discussion to take place. And part of it will be, you can't talk about Buckhead cityhood possibility without talking about crime, because that's what the proponents say is the reason behind it. So, Stephen, what are we expecting when it comes to things dealing with crime, bills dealing with crime statewide? This is a statewide problem.
Exactly, Donna. Buckhead is not the only place that's seeing a spike in violent crime. So there have been efforts that the legislators are looking at. One thing Lieutenant Governor Jeff Duncan is talking about is something that is basically like the rural hospital tax credit, but for law enforcement. So people would be able to donate to help fund the police and other law enforcement in their communities to help them fight crime. Also, Governor Brian Kemp and the GPI have long been trying to tackle gang violence as an issue in Atlanta and other major metropolitan cities. So expect to see that probably in the governor's budget and State of the State address.
Yeah, so the governor has talked about the the gang issue in the past, and he's likely bringing that up again. And when we talk about it, an issue tied to reducing crime is, of course, one of the speaker's main priorities, and that's shoring up mental health. mental health care, I should say, in the state. And here's what he had to say in a recent press conference.
You're going to see some budget proposals to expand the capacity for treatment of individuals and to add some additional bed space. We're going to have to incentivize people to want to be trained professionally in that. And, you know, frankly, we've got a shortage of mental health professionals in this state.
So, Riley, this is a big one. The pandemic certainly brought to the fore a lot of things dealing with mental health issues. We also know that substance abuse is a major problem, has grown during the pandemic. So what can you tell us about what this proposal might all be about?
Well, this is a proposal that Ralston has been very passionate about for a long time. He always talks about mental health during the legislative sessions and things he wants to do for mental health. And I think, like you said, Donna, it's been spotlighted with the pandemic. You know, we understand now how critical these resources are. So one of the things he talks about is adding additional funds to agencies that deal with these sorts of this needy population in Georgia and adding bed space for people that need it and things like that. And I think there's also a new relationship that's being spotlighted this session as well, is the relationship between mental health resources and public safety. Ralston brought this up, that he wanted to create kind of a new service where a different agency other than law enforcement can respond to mental health calls like this to free up public safety officers. So I think that's something that we will also see in relation to the crime issue this session.
Yeah, and the other thing he brought up was the fact that it's hard to find people for those jobs. Like every other industry, that the mental health profession is suffering from. People who just aren't in that profession anymore. Finding the right people, incentivizing it, he said.
Absolutely, and think about the turnover in healthcare in general, right? And the people that deal with mental health issues, they need this care. That it's hard, and there's not a lot of people that want to do it. So incentivizing people to go into that workforce is something that the legislature should probably look at.
Yeah, and the only other thing is dealing with schools. He talked about the number of students, teens that we've seen, young people who've committed suicide. That really touched him.
Well, it's horrible to think, you know, that schools are opening and closing, and you're not sure if you're going to be in school the next day. And for a young person going through the pandemic, it's really hard to kind of keep up with this virtual schooling, especially if they're by themselves and kind of promoting this for themselves. So definitely the young population of Georgians is something that they're going to have to look at.
Yeah, so there's a lot on mental health that we're going to look at. And Stephen, let's stick with you on Governor Kemp's his big announcement last week. You were there, I believe, when he wanted to talk about constitutional carry. Talk about what that's all about and what it could mean.
Right, so Georgia has pretty relaxed gun laws compared to many other states, but what Governor Brian Kemp is supporting is a concept called constitutional carry that 21 other states have, and basically what that would do is it would be a law that would allow gun owners to carry firearms either openly or concealed without a permit. Right now, you have to have a weapons carry license to be able to conceal carry your weapon. That's about $40 to $70, depending on where you live in the state. It goes to the probate court, and it's a piece of paper that Governor Brian Kemp says isn't needed under the Constitution.
Yeah. So can you explain a little bit why constitutional carry is a little different? Is there a brief way of saying it? Well,
yeah. So basically, the Second Amendment, the right to bear arms, is the only paperwork that you would need to be able to carry a weapon, is what the governor says.
Yeah. And for some people, that's a little confusing because it means no permits, nothing else. That's the only thing you would need. There's still some people who are worried about people with mental health issues. It's getting back to that.
You know, there are 21 different states that have this. Each state has their own rules and laws, and the governor did not have specific legislation that he supported. There are a number of bills out there because, like you said, Donna, there are things that need to be figured out there about the mental health aspect, about, you know, verifying that somebody's a legal gun owner and things like that that will have to be ironed out in committees before it gets to his desk. But if there is a bill that gets to his desk, Governor Kemp said he'll sign it.
All right, then. Well, let's move on to something else, and that's pandemic-related bills. Do you expect any this time?
You know, I think that the pandemic is something that is kind of back of mind, right? We've been through it for so long. Lawmakers are still being tested twice weekly at the Capitol, and we're still wearing masks, and it's still this huge factor in how the Gold Dome is working right now. I think that a lot of the things we'll see pandemic related are going to be appropriations in the budget. You know, where do we need extra money, extra funds for testing is something Ralston brought up as well, because it's so hard to get a test right now, and our public health department, it really needs those additional resources. In terms of legislation, Lieutenant Governor Duncan mentioned extending the COVID liability protections for businesses. So if someone comes in and gets COVID, they are not liable for that person's health and then what they go through. So I think those are the big things we're going to see pandemic related, but we're still going through this pandemic. The lawmakers are still dealing with this under the Gold Dome.
Yeah, every single day we're all dealing with it as we go down there. So Stephen, let's change gears a little bit more, and because you're the go-to guy when it comes to elections issues, we're so happy about that with GPB that you're doing all of that. We know we're expecting a bill abolishing ballot boxes, right? If, at the very least.
Well, you know, since 2019, Georgia has seen not one, but two massive election overhauls that have given us the new ballot marking device system, that have overhauled absentee voting and things like that. And lawmakers are still not done changing how we vote. Now, a lot of that has to do with this being an election year. You have several members, especially in the state Senate, that are gunning for higher office and are trying to prove their bona fides to their base by either calling for an expansion of voting, or in this case, cracking down on it. And drop boxes are things that were put in place because of the pandemic. It made voting easier for people who didn't want to stand in long lines or be around people. It was used a lot in predominantly Democratic metro Atlanta areas, and the Republican-led General Assembly has moved back on those. And now we have candidates for higher office saying that it should be rolled back even further, and the only drop box you need is at the end of your driveway.
Yeah, so there's going to be a lot of discussion on that. I can't let you guys leave, but while we're still here, we've got to talk about the main reason that the legislature is meeting right now, and that has to do with the budget issues that you expect to be big this time.
Well, we joke that the budget is the one thing lawmakers are required to do. And I think this session will see a little bit of a different tone than we have in other sessions, because we've had really great tax revenue, tax income numbers for the last 18 months, right? So we have this extra surplus that we can use, and people are kind of battling back and forth. Where is it going to go? Kemp has his priorities. You know, he's asking lawmakers to approve a teacher pay raise. He's asking also for additional money for state employees, $5,000 for full-time employees. And we'll also see, like we talked about early in the show, mental health and crime are going to get a lot of these dollars too.
Yeah, we'll hear more at State of the State. Anything else you wanted to add that you think we'll hear about?
Well, it's important when thinking about the state's revenue that the government lately has always run light and lean, having more of a surplus, only funding what is necessary. And even with the federal money coming in to help fight the COVID pandemic, it's important to not get too big of a dollar sign in your eyes, because that money that's here this year might not be there next year. And so that's something that the appropriations chairs have to weigh.
Yeah, and one of the talk is of eliminating the income tax. So we're going to see where that's going to go. I am so glad you were both able to be with me today. I hope you'll come back. You think you will? Okay.
Oh, yeah.
All right. Thanks for coming on, lawmakers. We're going to stop now and have a break and talk about another issue when we come back, expected to gain traction during the session, and that is legalizing gambling in Georgia. Two lawmakers join me to talk about the possibilities of something passing in 2022. You're watching Lawmakers on GPB.
Cigna is a proud partner of Georgia Public Broadcasting and Georgia Lawmakers. Cigna's mission is to improve the health, well-being, and peace of mind of those we serve. More at Cigna.com to learn how you can help support your employees' physical and emotional well-being.
Lawmakers is made possible by Georgia Farm Bureau. With over 80 years of helping everyone understand the importance of agriculture in our state. After all, ag is Georgia's #1 industry. Food and fiber production represents over $74 billion in output of Georgia's strong economy. The Georgia Farm Bureau legislative team works to represent producers across Georgia at the state capitol during the session and year-round. Georgia Farm Bureau, the voice of Georgia farmers.
Georgia Humanities, connecting people and communities across Georgia to encourage conversation, education, and understanding. Find out more at www.georgiahumanities.org.
Welcome back to Lawmakers on this day one of the Georgia legislative session. Since the mid-1990s, when Georgia legalized the lottery, there have been efforts to legalize other forms of gambling in the state. Could this be the year? Joining me to talk about that and more are Republican Representative Alan Powell of Hartwell and Democratic Representative Billy Mitchell of Stone Mountain. Thank you both for coming on Lawmakers and wearing your red, too. You've got your red in there. You're both on the House Regulated Industries Committee, and of course, Representative Powell, you are chair. So, Chairman, let's talk about it. Speaker Ralston told reporters he sees an appetite for something dealing with gambling coming up this time. What are you thinking?
You know, Donna, we've been listening to this for a lot of years, and you know the polls have been run, and it goes on. 3 years ago, the Speaker appointed a special study committee to take a good look at it. We spent the summer going around the state and talking to people around the state and analyzing this. And you know, a lot of it came out, but there was still a lot of the different groups, from the sports teams to the casinos to all the other activities. They just couldn't quite wrap their hands around what they wanted. They wanted what they wanted, but not what was in the best interest of Georgia. Now, since that time, over the last 3 years, there's been a lot of discussion. I think the polls that are showing right now run anywhere from 68 to 72% as the average that people of Georgia say they want the right to vote. So, you know, I think the Speaker is looking at that from the standpoint of what do the people want. And then when we discuss a constitutional amendment, that's a completely unique situation. And a lot of people don't understand that process.
Why don't you explain it a little bit, what it would mean? So it's not that the Georgia lawmakers make the decision on whether or not gambling
and I've told
happens.
people that, you know, when people say that the legislature is going to legalize gambling, no, the legislature doesn't legalize gambling. The only people that can do that is the people of Georgia, because it's in the Constitution that gambling is prohibited, with the exception of the state lottery that was changed 30 years ago. It would take a constitutional amendment. The people of Georgia would have to vote on that. And it's not an easy process. It takes 2/3 of both the House and the Senate to pass a bill to put it on there. Now, from my experience with the late Governor Miller on the lottery a few years ago, that was not an easy process then. And it won't be an easy process now, because there's a couple of issues in the constitutional amendment. One would be, as always is, where will the money be spent that comes in the revenue? And then what other criteria would be around that, such as, if it happens, I'd like to see a second referendum for those counties who don't want it in their county, or they don't want a casino or horse racing or whatever, and that would be left up to them, hopefully.
Okay, so you and I both, you were in the legislature at the time, in the mid-1990s when this happened, and I was covering it and all, and it is a long process to go through it, so people need to understand that. I'm going to turn to you, Representative Mitchell, in terms of talking about the different types of gambling we're talking about, because there are different things that we're looking at. Sports betting is one of them. Explain some of the things.
Well, certainly there's a plethora, if you will, of opportunities. We're talking about, I think when people think of gambling in the state, they think of casinos. As a matter of fact, we don't even call them casinos anymore. We call them destination resorts. Certainly there's online sports betting, where you literally can go online and vote a whole category of sports. Then even there's horse racing even. And these would give the consumer an opportunity to bet that whichever interests them. And you know, the chairman is absolutely correct. I believe that these kinds of bills are very difficult because as chair of my caucus, I tell you, they're all over the place. But the the common denominator is what's good economically for the communities that we serve. And that's where I come on. I will tell you that if everyone gambled like I do, and playing the lottery is gambling, it would be a failed business. You know, the only time I play the lottery it's when it's up to Chairman Powell's level, you know, $500 million or something, and I have to be in the right place. But I can't deny that what it has done, the Hope Scholarship has done for Georgia is phenomenal. It has kept some of our best and our brightest at home. Every now and then I'm asked to assist a student getting into our flagship universities with a letter of reference. And I tell them all the time, there's only two ways that you can get into our flagship universities, is that you have to be an extraordinary, a Hope Scholar, or an outstanding athlete. And that's what the Hope Scholarship has done for Georgia.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about the funding areas. Is it too soon to talk about where some of the money would go in Georgia?
You know, Donna, you know, the governor hasn't weighed in on this. One of the issues that we deal with, the Hope, as Billy had referred to, the Hope has been so extraordinarily successful that a lot of people think that's where the money needs to go. But the lottery and the Hope, that we have a major shortfall reserve fund. And the Lottery Georgia has a unique lottery, and it just continues to bring in record amounts every year. So we've looked at it, some of us have looked at it, and I've been an advocate that any of this new revenue would be dedicated to the number one hole in the state budget, and that's health care, whether it be mental health, physical health, Medicaid, wherever it may be, nursing scholarships and stuff like that. So, you know, I'd like to see this money, if the people of Georgia decide that's what they want, I'd like to see it go to that purpose, because that is something that would benefit every Georgian, regardless of party or anything else.
Okay. I want to get into a couple other issues while I have you both here. Representative Mitchell, you're president of the National Black Caucus, Legislative Caucus, state legislators. So tell us briefly what that organization is about, and then what priorities that we might see in the legislative session.
Well, we represent the interests of the African American legislators nationwide. We represent, there's some 717 such legislators. We had a conference recently, first week of December. I'm glad to say that the state even supported it, where we had 517 in the room. One of our initial, as a matter of fact, the 44th president was an active member of the organization. And I tell folks all the time, if I had known that he would become the Barack Obama, I'd built a better relationship with him. But the reality is, one of the greatest things that we're doing now is starting a public policy research institute, which will undergird and serve as a resource for legislators with similar issues all over this nation.
Yeah, so it's kind of a way of educating people on things.
Absolutely. Much like the conservative groups, ALEC or Heritage Foundation, we wish to have the same.
Okay, and Chairman Powell, we don't have a lot of time, but I did want to talk about something that you've been working on over the years, and that deals with medical cannabis. Where are we right now? And like I said, we don't have a lot of time. Where are we with that?
This is an issue that we passed 2 years ago, medical cannabis, for sick children and people who were deserving and needed this. It's been proven it helps them. We passed it 2.5 years ago, and today they still are in the process of granting licenses. There seems to be a major issue or a major problem in that. From what I've seen, we had hearings of the Committee, Regulated Industries had committee meetings on this in November. We think there's some changes that need to be made to ramp this up, to get them started and get moving. There's been 6 license applications that's been tentatively approved, but you had some others. But because of and I really think that, quite honestly, the problem was that there was a lack of due process in how the licenses were reviewed. You had 6 of the members of the commission, and each of them looked at a part of it. They did not have money to hire consultants who could actually look at it, that knew the industry. So hopefully we're going to be moving forward to correct this situation.
And a lot of parents and kids need it. We're going to have you back on to talk about that, and you also to talk about some issues. I want to thank you both for being here today, for coming on Lawmakers. I hope you'll both come back, and thank you for joining us on Lawmakers. You can join the conversation on Facebook and Twitter at GPB News using the hashtag GPB Lawmakers. And don't forget to tune in tomorrow at 9 a.m. on GPB, your GPB station, for Political Rewind, hosted by Bill Nagat. We'll see you again on Wednesday night at 7 because the General Assembly takes tomorrow off to continue celebrating Georgia's College National Championship win. And finally, I'm the mother of a UGA student, and so I have to say, go Dogs. Have a good night.